Hello everybody, and thank you for coming to another nature story time today. Today we're going to be talking all about trees in our story, and trees have been around for a very, very long time. So the first trees with woody stems showed up in the fossil record about 360 million years ago, so they've been around for a while. And for a long time we've known that there are tons of benefits that come from trees, right? The thing we usually think of first is that trees make oxygen. They make the air that we need to breathe and that all the other animals need to breathe. They provide habitat for tons of different animals. They provide us with wood that we use to build things like houses and furniture. They provide tons of different food like apples and different kinds of fruit. Maple syrup, who doesn't love that on their pancakes or waffles in the morning? Their roots hold our soil in place, which actually helps filter our water and keep our water clean. So trees help protect our water resources too. There's so many benefits of trees, not to mention it's really fun to hang out in the forest, right? Or go camping or hiking or take a walk through the woods. So trees help us in so many different ways. It wasn't until very recently, about 30 years ago, that we started learning that trees are doing a lot more than we thought they were doing, and that they can actually communicate with one another. So our story today is all about that newer research being done on trees. It is called Listen to the Language of the Trees, a story of how forests communicate underground. Words by Tera, Kelley, and pictures by Marie Hermanson. Let's get started. I'm excited. The forest was full of chattering. A jay shrieked at a sniffing coyote. A squirrel scolded them from a low branch. The trees rustled as if whispering to each other. No one noticed the tiny little seedling pushing its way above the soil. Quietly, its needles stretched out in the cool darkness of the forest floor. It was a miracle it sprouted at all. As a seed, it had been tucked inside a seed cone hanging high on the branch of a giant tree. Until one day, jump! The squirrel grabbed the cone and scampered down the tree. He buried it in a special spot for a winter snack. The seed rested underground for months. Luckily, the squirrel had a lot of special spots. He never came back. Nestled inside its cone, the seed waited. When it was ready, the seedling sprouted at the base of the giant tree. Centuries ago, this mighty tree was a tiny seedling too. Now it towered over all the other trees in the forest, strong and straight. It looked like it could survive anything. So it says centuries ago it sprouted. So that means this tree is several hundred years old. That's pretty cool. But no part of the forest is entirely free from danger. What do you think is going to happen to this tree? This illustration might give us some hints. As small as it was, the seedling's roots reached underground and met the roots of other trees. Threaded between them was a silky net of fungi, a web that stretched from root to root and beyond. Through this web, the forest passed secrets. Ooh. The trees talked to each other through their roots. They spoke of danger, of drought and pests. They spoke of what one tree needed and another had to give. The seedling began to listen. So you can see through this roots. Fungi are like the underground parts of mushrooms, right? These whole fungal networks. And we can see that the roots are passing along different things. So there's a sunlight symbol here. It looks like maybe some nutrients and water. And the trees are talking back and forth about what they need, what others have extras of and could maybe share. That's pretty cool. The giant tree with its huge crown gathered an abundance of sunlight. It soaked it up and turned it into food. So trees use the sunlight in a process called photosynthesis to make themselves food. It took care to send the little seedling enough to nourish it. So the big tree is making food for the little tree. How did it know the seedling was one of its own? It was a mystery, buried under the soil where their root tips intertwined. It was not the only tiny seedling that depended on the giant tree, but the rest of the forest too. Larger than all the others, the giant tree sent nutrients through the underground web. It brought water up from deep in the earth. It housed the owl that nestled in the upper limbs, and the coyote with its den at its foot. Day by day, the seedling inched taller. Then one night, everything changed. What's happening tonight? The sky came alive with lightning flashes. The forest swayed under the force of the winds, and thunder roared in the sky. Tucked safely down below, the seedling's needles barely rustled. Until... crack! A massive strike lit up the giant tree's crown. Thud! Down went the uppermost branch. The animals of the forest scattered. The jay shrieked, the squirrel ran. For a moment, the giant tree lit up with an orange glow. And then, darkness. In the morning, it was quiet. The giant tree had been struck. It had burned briefly, but it still stood tall. Down on the forest floor, the seedling was missing one of its branches, snapped off when a limb had fallen from the giant tree. Otherwise, it had escaped harm. But something was different. What do you think might be different? A streak of golden light touched the seedling's needles. Instead of only drinking from its roots, it drank in the full light of the sun. For the first time, it made its own food. So it's been in the shade of the big tree, and now that this big tree lost a big branch, it has some sunlight that's reaching the forest floor. After the storm, the animals returned to the forest. The squirrel began its seed cone collection again. The owl took a long nap. The forest waited. The forest listened. That's when the first winged beetle landed. The beetle sent out an odor, or a smell, which said, "Attack!" Winging through the air, crawling over bark, beetles clustered on the giant tree and laid their eggs. The giant tree sent out an alarm. Danger! The warning pulsed through the forest, passing through the tree roots, carried by the web of fungi. So they're talking to each other through their roots. The big tree, after getting struck by lightning, was weak, and the beetles were able to get in and attack. And now this tree is telling all the other trees, hey, I'm being attacked by beetles. Watch out for beetles. Day after day, the beetles attacked. A small but persistent swarm. No more sugar flooded the underground web from the giant tree. Just distress. So big tree used to provide food to all the other trees, and now it's not doing that. It's just saying, hey, I'm being attacked. Then something unexpected happened. Through the threads of the fungi, from root tip to root tip, nutrients flooded. Not out from the giant tree, but toward it. The forest gave what it had so that the giant tree might live. And it did. Someday, with luck, the seedling would grow tall too, but for now, it drank deep through the web at its roots and waited and listened as the forest talked. The science in the story. A Douglas fir tree can live to be hundreds of years old and grow as tall as an apartment building. But when it first sprouts from a seed, it's smaller than the palm of your hand. Douglas fir trees make seeds that are hidden inside cones. These cones stay on the tree until they are ready to open, and then they release winged seeds, which are carried long distances on the wind. Squirrels sometimes eat seed cones or take them to bury and store for their winter food. If the squirrel forgets to dig the cone up again, the seeds have a chance to sprout. Just like a squirrel might do with an acorn in oak trees where we live. Trees, like all plants, make their own food from sunlight, air, and water. This is called photosynthesis. Have you ever seen a mushroom growing on the forest floor? These mushrooms are the above ground part of fungi. Some fungi spread through the soil under forests. Trees grow their roots through this web. Fungi can't make their own food like plants can. Some fungi partner with trees to get the food that they need. Fungi receive the food that the trees have made with photosynthesis, and in exchange, they deliver nutrients, water, and even messages between trees. That's really cool. Lightning is more likely to strike the tallest tree in the forest. Some trees catch on fire and burn up from the inside when struck by lightning. Large, older trees often act as mother trees. They might not be related to all the trees in the forest, but they do take care of them. Seedlings especially need their help. All right, the science connection. Let's hear about what's going on here. Douglas firs are not the only trees that partner with fungi to trade carbon, nutrients, and water. In fact, most land plants form relationships with fungi. Plants are sometimes connected to other plants through underground webs of roots and fungi. These webs are called mycorrhizal networks. They are very common in forests. Trees receive valuable help through these networks. By sharing resources, all the trees in a network stay healthier. But why do fungi partner with trees? Fungi are more like animals than plants. They can't make their own food through photosynthesis. Fungi harvest carbon, carbohydrate sugars, from decaying material around them. But receiving carbon from trees is a lot easier than getting it for themselves. Fungi can receive up to 30% of the carbon passing through the underground network. In exchange, fungi provide nutrients and water that they harvest from the soil. They also exchange messages between trees. It's a good deal for both trees and fungi. Scientists are continuing to research how mycorrhizal networks work. There is so much more to discover about these amazing underground webs. Here's what we know. Resources and information are shared through the mycorrhizal network. Trees can recognize their kin and send them extra resources. Seedlings that are connected to the mycorrhizal network do better than seedlings that are not connected. Trees can emit distress signals that travel through the network. Neighboring trees may care for sick trees by sending them resources. What we don't know, so things scientists are still researching. Do trees control where resources are sent in the network? Do fungi decide which resources get sent to which tree? Do resources always flow from trees that have the most to the trees that have the least? Do mother trees ever receive resources back from the network? Most research has been done in laboratories. How do these networks work in actual forests? So still lots to find out, which is pretty cool. This book in the back, it encourages everybody to help out the forest. So there's a couple ways listed here that you could do, because it says, remember that all the things in nature are connected. So whatever we're doing to help one thing in nature ultimately helps many other things in nature. So some of their suggestions were, if there's a park or nature area near you, take a trip to pick up litter. You could plant a seedling and take care of it. Hint, it doesn't have to be a tree seedling. And recycle paper products. You can also reuse paper for taking notes or drawing. And this book is from Dawn Publishing and Source Books, and they actually have a PDF guide of activities and resources that go along with this book. So I'll put that link down below. But get outside this fall and admire some of the trees. Maybe just take what we call a wonder walk through the woods and wonder what's going on. Ask questions about what you see, ask questions about the different trees and maybe how they're communicating, and get your brains moving in maybe a different way than you ever have before. I hope to see you again soon for another story time, and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.